Hello, hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm here with Somnath, who is an author for many publications. He wrote Spring Boot in Practice, and I'm very glad to have him here today. Somnath, thank you very much for joining me while drinking my coffee. And it will be a great discussion about Spring Boot, and of course, the book you wrote. Tell us more about you and what your experience is with Spring Boot. How did you end up writing a book? And we are very curious to find out a lot about you today.
So hello everyone. So nice to be here today. So let me introduce myself a little bit. So my name is Somnath. So I am basically from India, and so I have been working with Spring, Java, and Spring Boot overall, since past 10 to 11 years. I started with Java, and then Spring, and then gradually with Spring Boot. So that's basically I got introduced to Spring while I started my career in my organization. So before that, I was not having much idea about Spring and that sort of stuff. But then I worked on several projects on Spring, and then as Spring Boot got released in 2014, I started working in Spring Boot, and I immediately started liking it. Then I worked on several projects on Spring Boot. Next thing was as I was exploring various things on Spring Boot, I was writing more about this in my Medium blog, and that some of the articles were good, and that led basically Manning contacted me to that they were basically looking at to write the second edition of their book Spring in Practice. So then we started exploring that if there is a possibility, if I can contribute to that journey, and we started working on that Spring Boot in Practice second edition. Then since Spring Boot was very popular that time, so I thought, why not write Spring Boot in Practice instead of just writing the second edition of Spring in Practice. So that led us to that discussion that okay, let's start building a new book altogether, which is based on Spring Boot. And I started working on that book. I prepared the initial table of contents, and it goes through different reviews, and then eventually we are here with Spring Boot in Practice.
Well, Spring Boot is even now very popular, isn't it? I
Yeah,
mean, if someone would actually have to build an application, they will most likely choose Spring Boot over Spring Vanilla today, although it's probably not unlikely to choose Spring Vanilla if you want just the dependency injection or aspect oriented programming part of it. But Spring Boot is such a great tool, isn't it? What do you think?
Yes, definitely. So it's basically it takes a lot of boilerplate setup, and all those things takes away from the developer. So that's one of the key aspects of Spring Boot. So, for example, I still remember, like, before Spring Boot, when I used to set up one any Spring or MVC project, it was a pain to set it up and deploying the war in Tomcat or other observers. But then Spring Boot came, and it's just like it takes away all those difficulties and all those configuration issues, and you can just with a single click you will have your application up and running, and you can focus on whatever you are building.
It is also this convention over configuration. That's how we usually call it. Does it also bring disadvantages in your perspective?
I mean, so the way I look at it, if you see that particular concept of convention over configuration, it's basically, I would say it's a good thing most of the times. Maybe in a few scenarios, it might not work very well, but other than that, if you see that the most of the developers or most of the things which we do on day-to-day basis, it's basically what we are looking for. We have some concept or some idea which we would like to build, and what we're more interested in is to getting started with the things, right? So if there is something which is setting me up easily, and if I can focus on what I would like to build, that gives, I believe, I take that as an offering, which basically makes life easier. So definitely that's a good thing.
And about the learning curve, for example, does Spring Boot help or it makes it less comfortable? Because I think I've actually heard a lot of opinions, which are some of them pro, some of them against this. The simple fact that Spring Boot hides behind the scenes a lot of things, it self-configures a lot of stuff, can be difficult to digest for a beginner. But on the other hand, some say that well, it's easier because it's like an automatic gearbox of a car. You don't have to learn how to use a gearbox. If you have a car with an automatic one, and it will still work, and you will still be able to build your applications like driving the car. What's your opinion on this subject?
I agree with that, but if you see this, the Spring Boot, it declares itself it's an opinionated framework, right? So it gives us the perspective that there are a lot of things it is doing for us which are hidden, and that's the purpose of the framework to make the developer life easier. So having said that, yeah, if someone directly jumping into Spring Boot, it will be definitely difficult without having any knowledge of Spring, and that's what many people does these days. Directly jumping into Spring Boot and start generate a project and try out different things without understanding what is happening behind the scene, because Spring Boot does a lot of heavy lifting behind the scene. It with this auto configuration, lot of complexities, lot of abstractions are there, which until unless somebody goes, and if someone wants to understand, they need to dig deeper. And but the good part is that once we start understanding how these things are working, for example, if somebody goes and dig a bit deeper into auto configuration things, like for example, if you see how that wave auto configuration works, the good thing is that it's a similar kind of setup. So once you understand one part of it, or the foundation, how the auto configuration works, it makes even that then auto configuration will no longer be a mystery. You can easily figure it out how things are working, or in case even you have some difficulties understanding if certain things are not working as per your expectation, you can easily do it debugging and go into that auto configuration classes, or that sort of stuff, and you can easily figure it out. But yes, you are right. If you are directly jumping into Spring Boot, the learning curve is slightly complex, and yeah, we need to go as a step by step, having some foundation about Spring, and then understanding the auto configuration part, then it will no longer be a mystery.
Okay, so let me repeat to see if I got it. Your opinion is then you should start when learning. You should start with a bit of Spring first, and then continue with Spring Boot. So that's what you recommend a student who has literally no experience.
Yes, I would say that, because Spring Boot, if you see, it's basically under the hood. It is leveraging several the most of the part of Spring, right? So without knowing, having no knowledge of Spring and directly jumping into Spring Boot, some seems to be for some people maybe difficult to understand how it works. But if you have knowledge about how Spring works, what is the Spring as a container, and different parts of the framework, at least the Spring as a container, how for example the auto wiring works, or that sort of stuff, it helps.
Cool. So guys, you've heard what Somnath said. Learn Spring Boot because it's a very important tool today. But when you do that, you might face difficulties, and if you just start learning Spring and Spring Boot, you might find it difficult to start with Spring Boot up front. But you can anytime just start with some basics of Spring if you feel that is too difficult for you. Somnath, what about the new version of Spring Boot? Because it's only weeks since Spring Boot 3 has been launched, and a lot of people are looking forward into the version. Some of them already upgraded their production environments. Some of them didn't manage to put it yet in production. How often, how fast do you think about upgrading to the new Spring Boot now that we have it available? And for a reader, for a student, how difficult would it be to start directly with Spring Boot 3? Do you think that they should start with Spring Boot 2.x first and then jump to 3? They start directly with Spring Boot 3? How should they progress in learning Spring Boot?
I think I would say it depends on based on individual circumstances how they would like to take it. So if you see Spring Boot 3 got released sometime in November, and so it's, as you said, it's only a few weeks it's there, and so I would say if you see the feature set that has been released as part of Spring Boot 3, and it basically along with Spring Boot Spring 6, Spring version 6. So if you see the major theme was that native image as well as observability. So these are the two primary focus which basically got added as part of overall this Spring framework and Spring Boot 3. Along with that, it started supporting Java 17. So a lot of Java 17 features can be leveraged, like the records, switch expression, text blocks, and those kind of things. So in terms of adapting Spring Boot 3, I would say it, as I said, it depends on how the projects or the individual, they want to take a call on that. So for example, if somebody, for example, trying to look for a tech stack upgrade and they are moving it to Java 17 and all, and if they have that appetite to explore those things, like whether, for example, if you see Spring Boot started supporting native image, that gives a lot of boost in terms of fast startup time and the memory footprint perspective, which is the theme for Spring native module. So that way, I mean, if somebody wants to leverage those, and they can definitely adopt, but in production grade applications, maybe it will take some time to adapt it. Maybe as we move on with different Spring 3.0.x release, there will be more adoptions. But and if somebody starting afresh, something new, definitely they can start with Spring Boot 3, because Spring and Spring Boot both are very mature and stable frameworks. So that definitely, I mean, that's what I would say.
In terms of the changes for the fundamental part, for the basics of Spring and Spring Boot, do you think it makes any difference if you work with Spring Boot 2.x or Spring Boot 3?
I don't think, because I don't think like if you say, for example, Spring Boot 2.7 or Spring Boot 3, foundation wise, it's more or less same. For example, if you are looking, I think for most of the stuffs you can achieve with both the frameworks, like both the versions 2.7 as well as 3.0 series. So foundation or fundamental perspective, there is very little change. I can, for example, if I have a business requirement or if I want to build something, I can very well build it with both the versions, and nothing stopping me to use, for example, 2.7 series of the version. Only thing, like if I want to leverage some of the latest features, as I said, like native images, or using the better observability within Spring Boot, so then maybe I can consider using Spring Boot 3.x series.
Okay, that I think makes a lot of sense. Also, if I'm not wrong, Spring Boot 3 comes with Hibernate 6, which has some advantages, but they are not that big. So probably in terms of fundamentals, you will anyway not be really impacted. So as a student, I think if you start learning with a material that now presents with Spring Boot 2.7, most likely that will be enough for the beginning, and then you can jump anywhere and find out what's new in Spring Boot 3 and even apply them. In the end, the native compilation, the native images that you discuss, it's only a compilation. You still can compile, and in most cases you will likely compile non-natively your applications even with Spring Boot 3, because I don't think Spring native really makes sense in all the cases. What do you think?
Yeah, you are right. So Spring Native, even Spring Native also needs to like mature. If you see, there are a lot of things which, like for example, in terms of hints and all, which you have to configure, right? So Spring Native, maybe not, I mean, not everybody is looking for Spring Native like features that has its own merits and demerits. So in all general purposes, we can still live up with Spring Boot 2.7, and even we can use Spring Boot 3.x also. Maybe we may not use those features. So yeah, as you say, rightly said, Spring Native is maybe not the right use case for many people. So yeah, it depends what we are trying to achieve, and based on that, we should go and pick up the features which we would like to use.
And probably one of the best advantages would be if you use it in cloud, because that's where the startup time, I think,
Matters a
matters
lot.
a lot in terms of costs, in terms of
Memory footprint as well.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, but in terms of learning, it's still, in the end, if you know Spring Boot 2.7, the part of native compilation is just the compilation part, and you can do it in a couple of ways. I think a big part, just to make a short parenthesis, a big part of the knowledge you should take in regards to delivering to cloud and native compilation and the related stuff. I would also recommend you a book from one of our friends, Thomas Vitale, also mailing author, Cloud Native Spring in Action. And that's some kind of a different topic. I mean, it's a separate book, isn't it? Than Spring Boot in Practice, which is more on the fundamentals and what some student needs to know about the real fundamentals of Spring Boot. So that's it with the new versions and so on. In regards to Spring Native now, because you brought this into the subject, and it's a really hot topic today. We do have alternatives in the Java world. For example, we have Quarkus. Would it make sense for someone to still learn using Quarkus from Red Hat? Would it mean would it make sense to apply it in a real world production application? Would someone directly jump to Spring Native? What is the best approach in your perspective, Somnath?
Yeah, that's a good question. So see, we as we work, we will see a lot of competitive, that this such technologies, and it we need to see like whenever we are building something, it's basically we need to see which current stack, tech stack we are in, and what we are trying to build. And for example, let's say I'm working for an organization where I'm already with Spring and Spring Boot. Okay, so in that case, I would say I can very well probably do a comparison and see what benefits the other framework. For example, you may talk about Quarkus, what benefit it gives me, or what it takes me to go there and use that framework. Whether that cost benefit is is it that great, right? So based on that, I guess we should pick it up. For example, if I'm using Spring Boot and Spring Boot is providing the native support, which if I need, I would say like maybe I'll do a comparison, I'll do an analysis and see what additional benefit if it gives. Because if I go and probably use Quarkus, it's a different framework altogether. Although it's a Java-based framework, it's a cloud native framework, but it's a kind of a different kind of a shift for me. So I would take like see what benefit it gives me, whether that's what I need, or whether whether I can't achieve it through Spring Boot. Based on that, I will take a call and use it. Quarkus also is a great framework. It has that all those natives, a lot of cloud native supports, which makes it a great framework. But yeah, it's again individual choices and circumstances how they would like to use the framework.
Yeah, I do think the same. I do think that Quarkus is an excellent tool and is there for some years already, and I have seen it in action in several projects. So I even taught myself at some point writing a book on Quarkus. And by the way, now a book has been actually started. It's an early access out there for a few weeks. Quarkus in action. I didn't have time to read it, but that's definitely on my list, on one of the top priorities. So I will just jump in and read the first chapters as soon as I find some time. And I do recommend you to do the same, guys. So if you want, I'm pretty sure I didn't read it yet, but I'm pretty sure it will be a good book already. So
yes.
And by the way, you mentioned, and I will jump into a kind of slightly separate subject. You already mentioned earlier that there is now a bottom line on Java 17 with Spring Boot 3. We know at the same time that even if Java 17 is really appreciated and it's there in a lot of projects, we know that from surveys such as the GitHub survey, for example, or Stack Overflow survey. But we also know from the same surveys that there are a lot of applications out there still using versions like Java 11 and even Java 8. I will not go down below because most likely what's below Java 8 is something that's very, very old, monolithic, and deployed over some Java EE application server. But those which are real Spring applications and they are on older versions, what should the developers do? Should they upgrade? Is that such a good opportunity now to upgrade? Is it even a good choice that the team decided to put a bottom line on Java 17? What's your opinion in this regards?
Yeah, it's again like upgrading or being on the latest tech stack always helps, because that gives you a lot of, first of all, new and innovative feature sets, as well as it gives you benefit in terms of security and all those things, or the vulnerabilities and all those sort of stuff. So so I would say, in terms of upgrading to a versioning, right, whether it's a Java or Spring, I guess we can take a balanced approach. Basically, so being on too lower version might be a bit risky in terms of we are missing the for example, the things which are there in the newer part of the framework, as well as it exposes in terms of security or vulnerabilities. So, for example, many organizations or many applications, I would say, is still there in Java 11. Many of the production grade applications also are there. For example, I work mostly into banking and financial sector. So there, more than the trend is like being into something which is stable, which is time tested, and widely adopted in the community. So, for example, Java 11 is one of such choices. Many organizations are there. Many applications are running Java 11. But yeah, gradually shifting it to Java 17 is like slowly people are making the move. But if you see it depends on individual circumstances again. Like, for example, as I said, in banking and security, instead of banking and financial sector, which I have seen is instead of adapting into the latest and top-notch versions of the technologies, the more important part is whether that particular version is tested, stable, and it has all the security related patching and these things kind of. So I would say is like we can evaluate what benefit I'm going to get if I am going to a higher version. So being a higher version is always, it helps, because that brings a lot of new things and all those kind of things. But yeah, I think we should take a balanced approach here based on how we would like to take that.
One of your book's chapters, by the way, treats a subject that is, let's say, it might be of a good discussion for a near future of Java. And I would say, why not? Let's discuss a bit about it. And that's reactive programming. So your chapter 8 refers to reactive using Project Reactor with Spring Boot and Spring. And why I bring this in the discussion is because we know that very soon we will have a new long-term supported version. The end of this year, the end of 2023, we will have Java 21, which will be the next long-term supported. And we know that in the current latest, not the latest long-term, the current latest version, which is Java 19 at the moment, fibers have been released as a first preview. And it is very likely that we will have fibers like a general available feature in Java 21 in the next long-term supported. And fibers change a bit the management of threads in a Java application in a way in which the threads become virtual and they are no longer wrappers over the real thread provided by the operating system. And from an architectural point of view, that's kind of very close to what reactive programming does. Of course, it's not the same. I don't want to say that, but I don't want to jump also in details because we don't have time in our discussion now to jump. It's a very, very huge discussion. We can do it separately. But it's from some perspective, at least at the web applications, they tend to be competed by the fact that fibers now are virtual and they offer this management of the threads out of the box. Do you think in a short time or in a long time or maybe never will this affect indeed the web applications written with Spring and Spring Boot, or this can really change the way we write reactive applications in the future, closer or far away future?
Mm-hmm. So see, one thing I've seen is like somehow this reactive programming, like it's initially a bit hard to think through how these different parts works and how that basically works. It's like whenever we're doing writing Java application with this traditional model, thinking in terms of reactive, it's a kind of a shift which we normally do to write these reactive applications. So and you talked about this virtual thread. So virtual thread, yeah, it's one of the great features that is there that's coming in the framework. So virtual, I think it makes a lot of sense, in terms of, like, if you see most Java applications, we use concurrency and threading a lot, right? So virtual thread definitely is going to give us a benefit, but in terms of comparing whether how that it's going to going to have impact how we write reactive application, probably that time will tell. I mean, probably once it come out, we'll see. I don't think I'll be able to comment on that.
Yeah, definitely. We don't have a crystal globe. We can't really predict the future, but it's still a great discussion about what will happen. I always like thinking about what will happen in a few months, maybe a few years from now on in the Java world. And by the way, that's the last subject I would like to touch, since we have this bottom line on the Java version with Spring Boot 3, and we know that there are alternatives to the Java language in Spring Boot, because Java is just one of the languages that can be used over the JVM. And I always like to think when people ask me and they say Java is old or Java is outdated or Java is verbose, I always tell them, well, Java is not only a language. Java is not the Java language and that's it. Java is the JVM universe, and surprise, surprise, it has other languages. And in your chapter 10, you even discuss about how to use Spring Boot with Kotlin. That is another language over the JVM, and it's a very appreciated language actually, and it minimizes the verbosity of writing the applications. It was initially mostly known for writing Android applications, but a lot of people use it on the server side as well. Now, because we have this bottom line, do you think that Kotlin will take a bit more advance, because now suddenly people realize that it's maybe easier not to stick with a specific Java version? Or how will that impact? Will it, maybe it won't impact at all the way you write applications, but will it? Do you think it will in the end?
So first of all, see, Kotlin is a great language. It is, as you rightly said, it takes takes away a lot of verbosity, what we normally see in Java, and it has a lot of cool features. Having said that, I haven't used Kotlin too much. I use Java in most day-to-day applications, but I have explored it a bit, and that's how it is. But like if you see, it depends. But I mean, Kotlin is there for some time with the Spring Boot. So it has, in fact, Java 5 introduced that Kotlin support. So it's there for some time. And yeah, I think again, like but Java is still the dominant. If you see the way we get introduced whenever we come into JVM, that most of the people's first choice is Java and learning it. So naturally we go with the Java language. But Kotlin is a great alternative. So if, for example, if someone wants not to use Java because of whatever reason they don't like Java, they have this fantastic choice of using Kotlin. And not only that, if even Spring Initializer provides that support that you can generate your application with Kotlin, and you can go ahead and start writing with Kotlin. So I would say Kotlin has its own set of features, and some way if you're familiar with Kotlin, definitely Kotlin is a great choice to write Spring Boot along with Spring Boot to develop your applications. So yeah.
Yeah, I can say that I have used actually Kotlin to write a few microservices in the past, but it was some time ago. I remember it was Spring Boot 1.x when I have used that, so it's quite some time ago. But I really enjoyed using Kotlin. I do agree with what you said, and out of my observations, indeed, Java seems to still be the primary language. But it will be interesting to see how that will, and if that will change in the future. Cool, guys, I will make sure that you have very easy access to Somnath book. I will put the links in the description section of the video, in the comments. Please leave your comments in the comment section, leave your questions in the comments section. And I have some vouchers for you as well. Some of them are one use only, but I have also a voucher that will give you a great discount to Somnath book, which I really recommend. It's a great book. And it's also a 10 chapters book, which means it will not get you bored. And it's very valuable to read and understand all the things that are fundamentals on Spring and Spring Boot today. You will most likely find a lot of opportunities in the real world out there to use Spring and Spring Boot. Somnath, is it anything that you would like your readers and the viewers of this channel to know before we close this discussion?
Yeah, so I would spend some time talking about my book. So this the Spring Boot in practice. So as I started the conversation, like Spring versus Spring, whether to learn Spring or Spring Boot. So first, so in terms of Spring Boot in practice book, when we wrote the book, the idea was to give a lot of practical perspective how we should use Spring Boot. And if you see the book, the way it's organized, it's having a lot of materials, but the book is primarily focused on entry level to medium experience range readers who basically trying to learn Spring Boot, or somebody who has some understanding about Spring Boot and they really want to see how Spring Boot basically works in practice. So I have covered a lot of things in terms of auto configuration, which you discuss, which is like a kind of a magic or mystery for many people. So I have tried to explore that in my book. I've also explored in great detail about REST API building, which is another we use Spring Boot for. And then the book also has some kind of advanced material in terms of that Spring Boot native images, which you talked about, as well as I talked about GraphQL in my book, as well as in I have introduced, like, if you want to use Kotlin, like it's not, I haven't a lot of material in the book for Kotlin, but at least I tried to give some heads up, like if you want to use Kotlin with Spring Boot, how you can do that. So it's basically that sort of content I have tried to present in the book. So maybe I would like to hear from the readers how they find the book.
So please, guys, don't forget to always leave us the feedback on whatever you find platform, Goodreads, Amazon, O'Reilly Learning, Manning websites. So do leave your feedback, because it really helps us authors of the books to make the content even better, maybe in a next edition, maybe a next book that we are writing, and so on and so forth. Cool. With that being said, thank you very much again, Somnath, for being here with me and with all our viewers. Guys, remember, comments in the comment section, questions and so on. Don't forget that you can ask them. Do ask your questions and share your opinions. And until next time we meet, then guys, thank you very much for being here with us. Have an excellent time for learning, and we are waving goodbye. And yeah, see you.
Yeah, thank you.